Xandor, Ben, let me know if my audio is all over the place again. But yeah, I think let's not do any introductions. Let's dive straight into it. There is a ton of stuff to cover. It's been actual months since we had a proper section where we go through all the developments. Awesome. Okay, let's get into it.
2023. We're doing good.
April. There we go.
We're
We're waiting from.
For viewers, this is not a time travel. It is Friday, the 19th of April, 2024.
There you go. Coming live. Yeah, we went straight from like November to April. But all right, let's figure out. Yes.
And it is our anniversary episode.
That's true. That's true as well. It is our anniversary episode. And also I have a throat infection. So a lot of stuff going on. But let's talk about some JavaScript. Let's talk about Angular. I stole this from Tyler.
I've seen it written down, but I haven't heard anyone say it. It's hilarious.
I've stole this from Tyler, who does the from Bytes, who does the UI.dev stuff as well. He kept on calling it Angular, and this is too great. Cool. Who knows anything about this? I know a bit about it. I do know that there's a lot of conflicting things around like to what degree this is formalized, or whether it's just, hey, we acknowledge one another and we are just like going to talk about what you guys are doing and what we're doing. Then some people are claiming like, oh no, it's going to actually merge or whatever. So yeah, Xandor, you seem like you have a bit more insight here.
So I have insight at a high level, but if you ask Sarah Drasner, she's like, we've announced we're merging. And if you ask Minko Getchev, he's like, we want to build the best framework possible. So whether we merge the framework or just converge on some ideas, right? Like, we'll see. So yeah. It depends.
Because Wiz and Angular are very, very different things. From what I can understand, and we don't know as much about Wiz, but like Wiz is also end-to-end integrated. From what I've understood from some people at Google, is there's a whole like from doing a Java service to having some quality of life things for interacting with that service to very strange but sensible decisions that are made. I without seeing the actual implementation of the things, I wouldn't be able to say much. But from what I've heard, like they're very, very different from a DX perspective. And as you've mentioned here, Skulk, Wiz's primary concern is, I don't like to say performance, it's more like for latency critical applications, as I understand it's used. So like making an announcement that like, hey, Angular is going to learn from the Wiz team and take their learnings and employ it to make Angular a framework with a great developer experience that has serious performance or serious latency benefits. Like that's a cool thing to say. Like anytime any product or any team or any open source community gets a buttload of experience to be able to address a core offering of the framework, like that's something great, that's something to celebrate. But I don't understand like why this is a brand merger. This feels more like a corporate event than an event on an open source library. But looking on the positive side, if there's more institutional knowledge that can come into a tool that's used by many developers and many successful teams, I think that's a win.
So my understanding is I've heard some people from Angular actually mention in podcasts and stuff because it's interesting. The Angular team has been doing quite a run of podcast episodes recently, which is interesting. I guess really like punting signals and stuff. But it does seem like some of them are implying, not directly, but implying that Sarah Drasner has jumped the gun a bit on this, and it's not an actual merger. But also, then, as you rightfully mentioned, Ben, like, okay, but if it's just like, hey, we're just going to learn from one another and so forth, then the question is, why only now? Hasn't that been happening? Why hasn't that been happening? Like, why hasn't that been happening? But yeah.
So, like, what does merger
It's
mean?
strange.
Does merger mean we are doing an acqui-hire, or are we acquiring, in terms of companies? It's like, are we getting
Angular
the
is
team?
acquiring Google.
Are we getting?
acquiring
Are
Google.
we getting the IP? Or are we gonna change the color of our logo to match theirs? So like I was saying, this feels more like a corporate DevRel kind of decision than it is does a technical thing. And look, Angular and Wiz are used almost exclusively, as I understand it, as the two frameworks inside of Google. Google has thousands of engineers. So, yeah, sure, there is totally a place for that kind of DevRel thing. It's just, I think the rest of the community just kind of gets caught in that in that crossfire, because it's like most of us were completely unaware of the thing before this announcement. Maybe that's it.
I didn't even know what it was called. I knew it existed.
Same here.
I knew it existed. There was another internal framework that was being used by Google for things like Google Search and YouTube. But so the reason why they're talking about a merger or working more closely together is because as the web's evolved and as these kind of products evolve, their requirements are converging. So the frameworks now, whereas they previously had kind of different areas of focus, the frameworks now both need to, help with more of those kinds of requirements. So, for example, Wiz took Angular's signals implementation because it's older than Angular, if I recall correctly. And it was, so one of the things I do want to mention, it was designed or created by Malte Ubel, Malteubl. I think it's Scandinavian or something. And so he's got by now very old blog post and kind of conference talk that's on YouTube called.
Is it like 2 Z's? Like, why can I actually not find anything?
No, it's one. So there's like, he didn't talk about it by name. He just mentioned like, so this blog post is called "Designing Very Large JavaScript Applications." And what I thought was rather interesting is
like, share your screen maybe.
Hold on. One of the things that it talked about a lot was kind of the programming model and how the decisions about what you give developers and your teams access to influences the way that they build things and the solutions they reach for. For example, like having access to all of NPM leads to a lot of NPM install, right? But which in and of itself is not necessarily terrible. So it informed a lot of my thinking about front-end web application architecture as a result. And he does definitely talk about Wiz, but not by name. So this is a very interesting thing. And there's
I also think like one of the criticisms against Angular over the years has been that like it's not being dog fooded as much by Google. And I think, like
I think
like not only that, but
at some point that might have been true. At some point that might have been true, but like the incidences of Angular applications at Google seems to be pretty high right now. I mean, a lot of what we're doing now is talking on conjecture and talking on behalf of people we know at Google. So here's HN's a good place to probably get I'm for Googles. But like, I feel like a lot of this is conjecture, and
Yes.
I think kind of the last thing I want to say on this is probably just a good thing that doesn't really super affect us that much.
Yes.
Like the chances that this will affect Angular users negatively, I don't really see that happening.
Okay.
And like Wiz users are all inside of Google, so they've got their own thing.
Cool. Next topic. Still within Angular. Analog. And it might also be a good opportunity to maybe after talk about analog, or maybe before segueing into kind of, I've been deliberately seeking out like large scale Angular projects, because I think one of my goals this year was to really dive into Angular at scale, because I do feel it's like the one framework that I really don't have any experience in, and I'm curious what, especially in 2024, like what the story is with Angular. And maybe I'll give the short version of it. The short version is, after doing like large scale Angular work now for about 3 months, it's a lot more similar to the Vue and React than it used to be the last time I spun up Angular. It's changed quite a lot. And I think Signals is going to really change that up. But like one of the big things for me is you have standalone components now, which to me is very different from the last time I used Angular. Last time I used Angular, you had to do this thing where it's like a module, then you package your components inside a module and you share the modules, and now you can literally just have standalone components.
And there's like 80 files to do something you can do in 12 lines of React.
Yes. Yeah. So it's actually surprisingly, I think, to me, it was way less of a culture shock than I was anticipating. Whether that's good or bad, it seems like most of these frameworks are kind of converging a bit in terms of kind of the, I guess, optimal way to do things.
That's a really promising thing to see, right? Because if you've been a developer for longer than 12 seconds and have worked with another developer, you'll understand that talking about a technical or an abstraction, there is a very subjective thing. And when you can get a bunch of developers to agree on something as a appropriate abstraction, and we're seeing it on the kind of scale that we are now with the front-end frameworks, where there's a lot of things that are very similar between them. Getting to abstractions that are kind of universally accepted, that is a very hard thing. The only I think the first real universal abstraction was POSIX, and look what that got us. So it's very, very promising to see. I do want to add to that we shouldn't be zealots. It shouldn't be we have the correct thing now. There should still be pioneers, and there should still be people investigating newer and better ways to do things. But it's a lot less bike shedding arguments that have to be had now. Is JSX a good thing? Yes or no?
Exactly.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that now is also a lot of that has moved away from questions around reactivity and all that. I think we've kind of established a lot of the best practices around reactivity. Even Angular started out with two-way data binding and stuff, and now it's mostly one-way data binding with the option of doing two-way data binding with ng model and so forth.
Signals is kind of a very different approach, and if we look at the landscape at the moment, we've got a lot of people on the Signals train, and then there's other people on the we'll just write an optimizing compiler and then it's not a problem train.
Yeah, that's true as well.
And then there's some people on the why not do both train.
Yeah, and there's nothing in. So I think there's a couple of things to mention here. I don't want to preempt our discussion about signals, but first and foremost, I think something that not a lot of people know is that some of these tools like Preact Signals is Preact agnostic. Like it's just built by the Preact team, but you can just use it with general JavaScript.
And there's a
other
React specific wrapper for it as well if you want to use Signals in React.
But you don't need Preact. So I think like Signals is kind of a general pattern, and it's not necessarily, because I also do think like the name Signals is kind of new, but there has been a lot of things that have kind of been proto Signal-ish, obviously Knockout, like the kind of where Signals was.
Knockout,
Observers,
I think
RxJS.
like Observables and Signals are very different things. And
yes, agreed.
Underneath it all, like it's also an observable is a pub sub and a signal is a pub sub.
But I think there's like what Ben is saying. There's an important distinction here in terms of the reason why Solid didn't call it observables is because he felt that term was kind of like already kind of, I don't want to say co-opted or whatever by actual like RxJS and what he was building was something different. I think like I don't want to like, I'm paraphrasing him, but I think what he said he was doing is he's actually doing observables right.
Well, the difference in my mind between Signals and Observables as I understand them is the Signals are like a lot more subscription aware, and subscribers are aware of their publisher in very different ways too, because like a very big thing about traditional pub sub and eventing and those things is subscribers and publishers are almost orthogonal, like they have to know nothing about each other, right? Whereas Signals is a little bit more of a like, I see you kind of thing. And it's I think what frustrates me about some of the dialogue around this is like this is nothing more than an implementation thing, right? That doesn't mean we shouldn't be spending time and thinking about implementations, but like Signals are an enabler for like they don't fundamentally change the user experience. They don't create new opportunities for new experiences. They enable things that would just be a little bit harder for library and framework level people to do.
And I also don't think they're always the best solution. I think the alternative approach is something more like a Zustand or a Redux, where you have a store level thing and you kind of diff your store. So I think in some cases that's a better solution than having all these primitives scattered around. And another thing as well is,
I'm not sure.
Really? Would you just say Signals all the way? So here's, I'll tell you. Sorry.
So I tell you what Zustand will give you. I tell you what like a formalized store like that gives you. It gives you what OOP people like, right? Like it gives you a little bit of state wrapped in an interface that you have to interact with. It's just object sending messages, schemes back.
I get what you're saying, but like I think a lot of people using Redux would take issue if you like kind of framing it like that. I think the one thing.
So Redux is just like the most formal way to declare an interface on top of your state, like. You like it is the only where the state lives. Any way that it can change has to be described, and I think that's really good and that's really powerful for a lot of things. I think there are definitely appropriate uses for that. It's just like I think not a lot of people need that.
So let me Okay, so let me maybe frame it in this way. So let's talk about like kind of. So I mentioned this name signals is new, but I think there's been a lot of stuff that has been signal-like leading up to it. I think Recall.js was one of them, and the reason why I say that is because when remember Recall? Like it felt like that was so big, and then everyone just forgot about it.
I can
A
neither
lot of people were like,
confirm nor
"Oh,
deny. I can neither confirm nor deny that I have an
yeah."
opinion
So
about this.
I think a lot of people like immediately when Recall became a thing, they started switching out all their state for Recall, all their Redux, everything, and I think like it didn't really catch on because I think we kind of realized that this isn't necessarily always the best approach. It's not like an evolution that's better. It's a different way.
Recoil as it first released didn't have the greatest developer
That as
API
well.
either,
Yes,
right? Like
but I would, yeah. But I
from
would say it's a
memory,
proto.
it was pretty cumbersome.
So
Yeah.
back in the day, long ago, I actually integrated RxJS with Redux in some React applications.
Some people
And-
do that. Yeah.
You win the hipster award.
Right. Well, so and at the same time, I also implemented fetch as you render rather than render as you fetch or something, whatever, like the opposite of what the waterfall thing is, right? So
Yeah.
basically which is
Yeah,
now
fetch
what's
as you
coming
render.
into all the modern routers. The problem was
Look at the URL and it'll tell you everything you need to know.
the problem was the mind share of these kind of approaches with other developers that are working on the same team, where I like functional programming, and a lot of this stuff actually comes out of functional reactive programming, which is the streams version of this.
Yes.
But it goes it goes back very, very far, functional reactive programming and streams and that way of thinking. One of the things I want to mention is there's an interesting kind of talks called UIs are streaming DAGs. I've put a link
that's such
in
a
the chat.
Great talk. That's such a great talk.
So it talks about like closure, but the concepts aren't necessarily closure specific.
This is where that electric closure thing. It's by the author of the electric closure law. Yeah.
So what's interesting about the concept, really, right? And this is actually like another way to think about the whole React server components and the new React architecture as well, because the idea is to even think about this streaming thing happening across the network chasm without you as the programmer really having to worry about it too much. Anyway, everything is a stream.
Yeah. So like I think like back to the point I wanted to raise. So first and foremost, like I think that's also a useful distinction is that I don't think like RxJS or observables inherently has this idea of state applied to them. They're just a way of piping data. Like they're almost, for me, asynchronous primitives. Whereas for me, signals is kind of state primitives. So that's where I kind of see them as different. But so we spoke about Recall. One I've been playing around with recently that is kind of basically signals for React is Jotai, which is really great. I don't know if any of you guys have used it. Same people as Zustand. But once again, so maybe this colors my kind of analysis a bit in terms of when I think about signals, I think about Jotai. When I think about something that's not signals, so something like Redux or whatever, I think about Zustand. And like to me, Zustand is easier to use outside of a specific rendering implementation than something like Jotai is. I think one of the things maybe that I've found with signals is that it couples maybe a lot more with your actual rendering than something like Zustand or Redux. But yeah, I might be wrong. Let's move on to the next thing, unless there's any... Oh, no. We wanted to talk about analog. Sorry, that was a complete tangent there. I think we were going on my experience with Angular. But let's talk about analog. Anyone has experience with analog? I've not played with it at all because to me, I don't really know what it gives me extra on top of to me, Angular seems very batteries included already. I don't really actually even know why there's a meta framework. It almost feels like Angular is what Next.js is. Has anyone played with it or used it?
No. So I mean, I don't know. The last Angular app I built was ages ago. So
Yeah.
I just know that it was announced and there's a new meta framework and there was they're making a lot of noise about kind of modern features like Vite and Nitro and having compatibility.
I think the file-based routing thing is also important. Like the directory tree go brrr and make URL.
That is true.
Like that seems to be a really good developer experience for a lot of people. Like a lot of people really like the idea of like understanding that most sites are these kind of nested structures under URLs and logically mapping out your stuff like that works. So like that's a nice thing, because if there's a shared convention in the community under a framework of like what that file system structure looks like, people are less surprised when they join new teams and they don't have to figure out whether it's $, or a colon, or a cat emoji in the directory name to take an ID or whatever, right?
Yeah. So I think my reasoning about it might have been like wrong. Like I think if you think about it as an abstraction on top of Angular, it makes more sense. I was thinking about it in the same way that something like Next is in relation to React, where it gives something that you can't do with React by hand, unless you have a ton of time and hate yourself.
I was about to say, like, you better qualify this damn well.
Yeah, sure. But, like, also by that definition, like, you don't even need React because you can technically do it by hand as well. But I think, like, that's not necessarily the case with Angular. I think Angular just gives a bit of a nicer abstraction on top of a lot of the stuff, like routing and so forth, that you already get with Angular. But I might give it a try because I'm kind of doing a bit of Angular work now, production Angular work. Let me just quickly see. Okay, cool. There's some questions here. So just from Tom Radford, just mentioning that Bytes is great. For those of you that don't know what that is, I highly encourage it. I think it's just bytes.dev. It's Tyler from UI.dev. Yeah, it's amazing. This is the one newsletter that I really look forward to, like every week. The other ones like JS Weekly and so forth, it's useful. Like I'm like, cool, I probably need to read that but this one I'm like, oh man. And yeah, it's amazing. Like his general writing style and everything you can probably tell from just the thumbnails. It's amazing. I literally think the tagline is, he changed it. I think for a long time the tagline was JavaScript lol. JavaScript, lol. Cool. So also some stuff from Marcus. Wiz Angular to steadily open source Wiz features. Oh, interesting. So there you go. I don't know, Mark. I don't know what your source is on that, but yeah, if that is the case, like that makes a bit more sense than just saying like, hey, we're going to be unofficial friends. Okay. Yeah.
So there's a bunch of stuff that happened like over the last few months in terms of news announcements in the React ecosystem.
Yes. Can we keep those for the end, because
we're already like halfway through.
Yes, but I think once we start unpacking that,
living on a prayer.
There you go. All right, let's chat about Astro DB. So one of you guys, I think it was, so when we initially quickly spoke about this, Ben, I think you expressed some curiosity or cynicism around this, or
I just don't understand. So there's been a lot of hype and excitement in the JavaScript developer ecosystem about Astro DB in particular, and I don't quite understand why it's a managed database. Like, why is this one amazing? I don't get it. Like, I'm not trying to say that it isn't.
Yes.
I just don't know now.
I just don't think you're the target market. I think the target market for this
Not
is
at all.
like people devs who associate DB with that thing in cPanel. Right. So like anything that can happen to make proper or seamless and well configured database access a easy developer experience or even like a content editor experience, I think is good.
In the same way.
Like imagine telling yourself from 14 years ago, who'd just been through their first PHP WordPress deployment to now go spin up a wow, I can't even. Is it elastic database? Aurora.
EC2.
Aurora's EC2 is the compute. Why can I not remember what the databases are called? Aurora is the serverless offering for databases.
Oh, does AWS not have that sales thing, or am I thinking about something else?
I need to open the giant Amazon product listing. I cannot believe I'm striking a blank right now. This is almost
also while we're on that, while he's looking for it, so the reason why I have currently Netlify open is, like to kind of show if I can find the flippant thing, to kind of like, so for example what they have is they have like authentication, and I guess you can use the same logic, like Netlify Identity is what it's called. So theoretically, sure, you can like go like just Cognito or whatever. But not only that, you can probably even go like Superbase or whatever, which is like something like Netlify Identity is like such a high level abstraction. And I think it's very similar here. Like it's I guess there's value in terms of someone who doesn't really want to dive into like the low level things around databases or even just a cloud database, and they literally just want to be like, I just want the platform that I'm already using to kind of just manage that on my behalf.
I just want to store cat pictures in a database.
Yeah, it's the same, I guess, with Webflow CMS as well. So eventually, like a lot of people, just because it's quite expensive, the Webflow CMS, a lot of people just use, once again, like a REST API or whatever, and they feed the stuff instead of using Webflow's own CMS. But once again, like it's that thing of like, I'm already using this. I'm first and foremost a Webflow user, and I want this. I'm not necessarily. I think the problem with us.
That looks so much better than Content Stack. Oh, but it's not headless, so that would make sense.
Yes.
So that kind of like makes sense. Then it's tightly integrated with the Astro platform and ecosystem.
Yeah.
And if you're more focused on the pixels on the screen, then like
I think we're coming
of the data itself.
Yeah, I think we're coming from the perspective as developers or as people that do a lot of work with cloud-based services and so forth, coming to Astro. Whereas I do think there's a large amount of users that their primary career story is around HTML and CSS and Figma and design, and they do a static site. But now you have lots of other things.
Devin and Claude.
The AI.
Sorry,
could they?
That was a bit mean. That was uncalled.
Oh, are you talking about real people here?
No, I'm talking about the AI.
The AI, yeah. Like they could have probably gone for less generic names, because like it's like, okay.
So Dev was Dev, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, that's a completely
I
different
think we should let the
Claude is the company behind.
I think we should let them choose their own names.
Yeah, Claude is Anthropic, right? Yeah.
No, that's Anyway, let's continue.
So, and it's I think also also to the point you raised, Xandor, I think it's actually an abstraction on top of Terso, if I'm not mistaken.
I know
So
Terso open sourced libSQL.
okay,
Yeah.
but they're
And
using
then-
Terso's. They're
kind of
using
great.
Terso's this SQLite. No, not SQLite. The libSQL thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
that's Terso open sourced it, and then
definitely a
Terso
step
using it.
forward.
Yes.
libSQL was
Yes.
definitely a step forward for SQLite on
Yes.
JavaScript runtimes. I think
Yeah.
that was a really,
Yeah.
really nice thing.
Yeah, definitely. And like once again, like taking this back to Astro specifically, I think like that's also, really cool and useful, because like the benefit of something like that is that you can have like something like that works really well when people have their own little pocket of data that they work with, and you don't have all these like relational connections between stuff. It's, hey, I just want to sync my favorited bookmarks or whatever, like something like. So I guess that's also more the case, where it's more like, okay, you have something like you have like you're building something like, I don't know, a Netflix or whatever movie watching thing or an educational thing in Astro, and you just want that extra level where they can sync their progress or whatever. But
like SQLite's also used a lot in mobile development, because it's kind of
for that exact reason.
fast, and it's like when you mention that kind of like pockets of data. There's a lot of that.
You don't have the same people. You don't have the same people accessing a lot of the same stuff. Yeah.
Hot take. So in the long ago, in the way back when, in the before times of like VB6 and Delphi, you used to run a database instance on the client, and sometimes that would sync to a server somewhere. And this was a big thing, and I hashtag predict that like we're probably going to start seeing that a lot more, where most apps will have like an in-memory SQLite thing in the browser. All their data is
local
is
first.
Local first.
But they refer to it as lo-fi, which is like, oh man, it's so frustrating finding any material. Huh?
Yeah.
It's not Googleable.
Yes, it's the worst. If you want any videos or whatever about it,
It's
This one.
what are the young kids saying today? It's on fleek.
I think
I have no idea
I
what
don't
that
know
means.
if that is still the thing.
Just as an aside, I like, before going on to too much of like, we should probably start like moving on to the next thing. But Xandor, have you read this by Ink and Switch?
I haven't read that one. No.
I'll send it to you. I'll maybe put it in the notes as well.
I might have read that.
This is really great. It talks about like local first, but it talks about the philosophical underpinnings of local first, not like in terms of what are the implications in terms of data
very
ownership.
long ago, Marius Schultz, the guy who created Om.js, which was another very reactive streams kind of like front-end framework. Cycle.js. Sorry, Om was like a higher level thing, I think, around it.
Yes.
Cycle.js.
Yes.
And he also wrote like a really great intro to reactivity. While we're there, the missing intro to reactivity. The introduction to reactive programming you've been missing. Not Marius Schultz, Marius Schultz.
Yes.
Yeah. So I haven't finished my art or even given my hot take. So local first is a thing, has been a thing for a long time. But the hot take is we're seeing a lot of work being done in SQLite replication.
Yes. Yes.
And while local first has been possible for a very long time on the web, it's been a thing that you have to really think about quite a bit, and it's not really that great.
It's a tough sell in terms of developer experience.
If I can define my schema with replication keys that like do just replicate on user essentially, and there's robust replication for SQLite, like that makes it really, really appealing for me to approach. And I mean, like we're working on Verse, for example. We want to get it ready to be able to run in browser against the SQLite thing, because we do think that it's gonna be a great experience for a lot of people to do. Like I feel like most of the people who end up using something like Hasura or Postgres would be better suited with just replicating the user's data to an in-browser SQLite. The text getting there, it's not there yet, but it's going to be interesting to see.
Yes. Also, just as an aside, this Konrad is actually South African, and like his dad and my dad is actually like super good friends. So like
everyone's skull.
Yeah, like we actually grew up together, which is such a small world. But who would think with a surname like Hofmeyer, you'd be South African? But yeah, he's living in the States now. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about JSR. Anyone used it or played around with it a bit? I find it super fascinating. So the really shallow take is, it's a competitor to NPM, but it's actually not. Like it has some very clever like fallbacks to NPM and so forth. Ben, have you used it at all? Tried it out?
I have no need right now to do that.
So I assume neither of you guys. It's a pity.
I've run like my own registries for forever.
Is it? It's like go to ben.com.
No, like
stuff.
It's not Dino.
It is. It's Dino's. It's Dino's registry.
Is it Dino's one?
Yes, but there's some interesting stuff there happening with like.
I thought Dino's one was Dino.land.
No, that's not. So I think also like we're conflating because of NPM being both a registry and
a tool. Yeah.
Yeah, I think JSR is the actual way to manage your packages. Whereas
like
Dino.land.
I do think like
because JSR is not Dino specific.
It's created by the Dino team.
Okay.
And it is like, for Dino.
NPM is okay, and I would encourage like exploration in the space and like innovation in the space of registries. I just don't think like it really affects that many people. Like as a library author, there's a lot of things that frustrate me about NPM, but it's also things they want to fix. It's just I like seeing competitors in spaces because it breeds innovation. I'm not a Keynesian person generally, but competition is generally good for innovation, and I think this is likely a good thing.
So I think one key distinction here and why I like this, even though I'm not using it, is there's a lot of really cool stuff you can do if you make your package registry typed as a requirement. If everything in your registry needs to be typed, there's a lot of cool stuff you can do in terms of static analysis and so forth that you can't do with NPM if you're treating stuff being typed as an afterthought.
So like the supply chain management stuff that enables is great, but the more broad that like GitHub adding their security tab a while ago to repos, I think that was one of the better changes that has happened in a very long time, because it makes these things more accessible for people to understand like what is actually involved with things here. Yeah, but like JSR I don't have a problem with it. I read the initial post. There's a lot of cool stuff they're doing, and there's a lot of innovation they're bringing. I don't know why you sound so negative today. Like, it's a cool thing. I'm actually semi-excited about it.
Screw you, Ben. Huh?
I didn't
Stop being such a downer.
I didn't read that JSR is requiring everything to be typed.
Well, it's Dino. So
Which is no, but it's not Dino specific. It is like you can use it with Node.js. You can use it.
I'm pretty sure it requires things to be typed because one of the
All I can find is that they discourage certain types of types in the imports and exports of packages because that can lead to slowdown, and they have like a checker for it. Like that's about it.
I might
So
be,
if you're using types,
Well,
types,
so that's what Scott was trying to say is the registry does some static analysis on the bundle published to it, and it informs you. It has some quality of life stuff around.
Yes.
And I mean, that's great, right? Like, imagine a registry where, so every publishing pipeline I have for anything has like an ESLint stage, has a bundling or minification stage for certain things, like has all of these things. But like imagine pushing to your registry and it's like, hey, you're doing an unsafe operation here, or one of your dependencies has been in the supply chain attack, or like the way you're using a deprecated method on one of the libraries. Some of those examples are awful examples, but like there's cool things that can be done if that is a stated goal of the registry.
So I think I think one of the key things for me is why I'm really like, I wouldn't say excited by this, but why I find it interesting, like why I'm following it, is because I do think, so once again, sure, I actually don't know the answer to, I don't think you are correct that it's a hard rule in terms of typed, but it's definitely seen type packages as the goal.
Yeah, no, that's what they're aiming
because
for.
another thing
and
is
those
you don't
type
have to
packages.
compile it.
If
Like you can
if you
just
are
push your
publishing
TypeScript
TypeScript code, if you are publishing TypeScript code, they have rules around that. So everything has to have return types, for example, and that has to do with TypeScript performance. Because what happens with the TypeScript compiler, right? Like what it does when something's got an explicit return type, it just kind of takes that return type's word for it. And especially if you're importing that from another project or another module, it doesn't go and like recheck the internals of that file every time it uses it. Whereas, and yes, like in situations where it's inferring return types inside of your own project, it does try to cache those results. But there are certain reasons why it has to go and re-infer and recalculate that from time to time. So,
I feel like that's an annoying thing about TypeScript though, because like the happy path for TypeScript is, from an experience perspective, is it's just like let the inference do its thing, because there, like as a library author again, like there's some signatures where if I had to type that return type, it would and not just go with the inferred result, which is correct. Like to correctly type some complex,
like spreads are really hard to type in TypeScript.
like
verse.
They're possible to, like some of the
he's talking about verse here, guys. Let's just call it
like one or two return types in verse that I'm not sure I would be able to type. Because they're like recursive, difficult things. Like I would probably burn out before I finish typing them.
But there's trade-offs.
But the inference works fine.
Yeah, there's trade-offs because there is some optimizations you can do if you don't do that from a registry perspective. Another thing as well is like it also by definition it forces ESM, so there's no like CommonJS, any of that nonsense. So I think once again, like you can have a lot. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do if you draw that line and you just say no CommonJS, get out of here.
Get out of here.
Get that nonsense out of here. Breach. All right, let's talk about signals.
So There is
Sorry,
signals.
you want to go back?
We kind of covered signals already. I just looked at the
Yes.
clock. We got 10 minutes left, and there's a bunch of
Yes.
React stuff we wanted to cover.
Okay, let's quickly just mention that there is a TC39 proposal to add signal.
Watch this. Like, aside from the technical content of like the signals proposal, the way this TC39 proposal is happening is a little bit different.
It's moving really fast.
It's got a lot more momentum behind it.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot happening here that is outside of the proposal itself, but like intent and like community and like this is like there's a little bit of potential conflict here as well. It's drama potentially, but
yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, so like this might kind of change how some of the norms around a TC39 submission work.
Or they might rein it in, but my take is if you want my before we dive into the React stuff, if you want my like crystal ball speculation, I'd say that like you tend to see this quite a bit. Like initially when it was proposed, like it's over ambitious, and I think a lot of people, you saw the same web components. I think a lot of people are like, cool, this is actually going to replace all the other signal stuff. I think what's going to happen eventually, like as people start working for it, what we're going to end up is like a standardization of the way that some browser primitives that frameworks can actually interface with to implement signals.
So I think it's used a lot. Also, you got to remember it's going to be faster when it's written in C++. Plus, it means you don't have to ship it to the client if it's built in.
I'm not convinced they're actually going to build signals in the browser, but we'll see.
Well,
it might be corrected.
Read the proposal, but so what's interesting about this is this is more analogous to promises, and they mention it in the proposal itself.
They're actually
to that proposal than like most of the other TC39 stuff has been. So it's a lot more of a already baked idea. Now we need to find consensus.
Formalize it.
Than it is a like, hey, I have this thing I want that I think there might be some place for. It's like the community has kind of already decided this thing is important, we need it. Now it's more like TC39, how do we get this thing?
And I'm on board with that. Like definitely I could see much more of a case for that than decorators, but that's just me. Anyway.
I think the most important TC39 proposal is operator overloads. I think that'll fundamentally change the language, but that's just.
I'd say the immutable types, but
like macros, but macros can never exist in JavaScript. Like they can never exist.
I'm going to share your screen, Xandor. You're going to give us a speed run of hey. Okay. You got to be on your toes.
Okay, cool.
I was just like sharing a screen. He's like browsing some random Facebook stuff.
Right.
All right. So, give us a quick rundown.
Okay, so the next major version of React is on its way. It's React 19. It will not include the reactivity compiler, React Forget. That's coming later. There's the off-screen API has been renamed to Activity, and it's also not coming in the first release of React 19, but it is coming later. So this is kind of something where you can get React to do a lot of the work for something that you aren't showing yet, so that like when you do want to show it, like React's already done all of its work, possibly already rendered the DOM, but at the very least already rendered the virtual DOM tree for it, and run all the effects and so this is nice, and also for pausing different kinds of work and giving things priority. By the way, Activity is a name that comes from I think the Android kind of like native ecosystem, where each view is usually called an activity. Not each view itself, but
sounds like something straight out of a game engine.
There's a bunch of things coming. So there's support for web components. So React is like the one thing that like if you look at custom elements everywhere.
Yeah, it's been the problem child when it comes to
Yeah.
the web component story. I actually think with the changes, it actually overtakes Angular, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, everybody else is at 16 out of 16. Okay, except Svelte maybe missing 2 points.
But
Angular,
doesn't
JS
actually
missing 2
affect
points.
React at all.
No, but it's useful. I think that it's great if you are in the web component space, because one of the problems at the moment is that it's a mission. Even if you're using something like Stencil. It's a mission to get it to work with React. So I think if you're React and you're just happily coding React and you're having the time of your life, it's not going to have any effect on you.
But there is going to be first-class support for web components, so that's really cool. Being able to bind to event listeners and custom events and that kind of thing is without needing huge wrappers is going to be very, very cool.
Yeah,
especially
I'm excited about it.
Especially if you, I don't know, let's say you have a React application and you've built a whole bunch of custom components using a React component library, and now suddenly there's a smaller side project that mostly backend devs are going to work on, and they want to use HTMX, which honestly makes sense if it's not got a high interactivity ceiling, but you'd like to have the same look and consistency. If you could easily export those React components you've already built as web components, suddenly that becomes easier to do.
Wait, is that an actual thing, or are you just speculating now? Because
no. Well, you can already do that with Preact, right?
Yeah. But I assumed it was about interop.
That's interop.
React,
but
using
that also means it's going to be easier because they have to align React with the DOM and how it actually works a little bit more in order to make that happen. I imagine it's going to be less boilerplate in a wrapper around a React component.
Maybe because I think maybe because I don't know how you translate things like hooks to web components.
Oh no. So each component will internally still have to run that logic. It's not like it's going to.
You'd write it in a different syntax. Oh,
yeah,
I see what you mean.
But the API for that component then is a web component. You can do it that way.
Okay.
And then
Yes.
That in web component land. Or
yes. Yeah. If you know that's what you want to do, that makes it easier. I get what you're saying. You can't go instantly press convert this to web components.
Yeah. So React Native has come out with a new architecture that you can migrate to. It's called Fabric. So this and a lot of this. So concurrent renderer, concurrent features, a lot of this work is also in preparation for something called React Strict DOM, which is going to be a new thing in React 19. And this is a place where when you use the DOM, unlike React DOM, which just has kind of all your host components, which are the divs and whatever the HTML stuff actually is under the hood, kind of available in the global scope kind of thing. Not really. It just when it reads the JSX, it knows how to transform that into the right thing. You're going to have
basically. Yeah.
You're going to have to actually. Oh, this is compatibility. Now we should do the README. You're going to have to actually import things like the HTML tag, like the div tag, like the p tags.
I'm not sure I have a problem with that at all.
Yeah, I
think that's probably cool.
And the styling in React Strict DOM works with Stylex. Now, what's interesting about this?
Because I wanted to. Sorry, I'm going to quickly interrupt you because my immediate thought there was when you said, "Oh, you're going to pull in the primitive element." I was like, you do with styled components, So it's okay, cool. I like where this is going. Yeah.
But React Strict DOM isn't aiming for, as far as I understand it, 100% full compatibility with the actual DOM. It's
no, and I wouldn't want it to. I wouldn't want it to.
No, I can't use it. I can't make marquee tags.
And this has grown out of React Native Web. React Native Web, if you're familiar with it, is a set of kind of primitives or components that were kind of React Native first, but you could also use them in the web. And
you'd be surprised there are people using that in prod.
Uber,
man,
Twitter,
I would advocate for that almost. If you're a scrappy small company trying to get product market fit, and you need to be on people's devices and on the web at the same time, and you're delivering a great product and it wouldn't be in people's hands otherwise, I would advocate for that every single day.
Yeah. And there's also stuff that isn't DOM specific. Like if you were to like a mobile game or whatever, something that would be built in Canvas, like
So
that's
we'll get to that in a little bit.
Okay.
But what I wanted to mention is the thing about React Strict DOM is that it's an expansion of kind of React Native Web, and it's I think they hired the guy who created React Native Web, now working on React, and the part of the new architecture changes in React Native and React Strict DOM is to also have everything that works in React Strict DOM work for React Native in the same way. And that's why they needed to re-architecture React Native, because there were some incompatibilities there with regards to event handling and the asynchronicity that would otherwise have been incompatible. What's interesting about React Strict DOM is that mentally it's a web first mental model.
Yeah.
As opposed to kind of like a React Native first mental model.
Do you think they're making a play for one framework to rule them all?
I mean, like, this is what a lot of people thought React Native was, and a lot of people still think React Native is, because it's like people want write once, run everywhere. Whether that's actually a good thing or not is debatable. I mean, like, if we look at the large players, Set it plus
yeah, but they have the money. It depends on your use case.
None of them lost, though. Like, none of them lost. I mean, like, Xamarin from Microsoft is like the great example of like how write once, run everywhere falls apart, and it's always this like panacea that's being chased after of, we just need one more Moore's law or whatever to happen. But this is interesting. Like, what's interesting about this is you could probably do this for most things, and then where there's a space where you want to drop down and like really make a nice native experience, for that scene you can drop down into actual React Native stuff.
So that's how TurboLinks actually works in a way, right? So they're kind of thinking, their whole thing is like, okay, the 90% of your app, which is usually, so the 10% of your app that gets used 90% of the time, built that in native views, and then the other kind of 90% of your app that's used 10% of the time, built that with web views. So TurboLinks is what Basecamp's built it.
Yes. So
Spotify,
the other thing.
So I just want to go through the React stuff.
Yes. So I just want to quickly mention to Ben. So I think another thing as well is like keep in mind that like compared to Xamarin and those things, maybe even Flutter, is that React is like almost like to the extreme just UI focused. So even if you're doing React Native, you're probably running that in like Expo or something that does a lot of that kind of low, like let's say you want to do camera stuff, you want to whatever, like that's a further abstraction. So I think like what React Native and whatever like is going to come from this has going for it is that it's hyper focused just in terms of interop, in terms of your UI. And you need different tools to do routing, whatever you want to do. Yeah.
So also, there was
Skia's great.
Yes.
So Skia is I think a C++ kind of library for a drawing library. So it's a 2D graphics library, and this is actually used by Chrome, by Firefox, the browsers themselves to actually draw the pixels on the screen. And Chrome, so Android uses it for their native components, and Flutter famously uses it as well internally. So React Native Skia is a way to have Skia draw stuff.
Flutter doesn't use Skia anymore, by the way.
Since when?
As I understand it, I speak under correction, but like I think Flutter is doing a different thing now.
It would be strange if they're not just using.
I speak under correction, but I think there's a thing that Flutter is doing that is a different rendering engine, either for like components of Flutter or something. But I'm pretty sure I read something about this.
So here's why it would be interesting if they're not, because obviously Google Chrome is effectively a native app that does rendering. Like
two different renderers for the web. So they've got
It
an
would be
HTML
interesting, like
renderer.
why they just wouldn't use what the Google team uses anyway, or
And then this
There-
CanvasScript thing, which uses WebGL
So
to render.
there's
Yep.
like, if you've ever used a Flutter app before, and this is why I know this, right? Like if you've ever used a Flutter app and you like open it up and there's like flash of unstyled content kind of frustrating thing.
Ooh, we need to get
The
Brad in
way
here.
that Flutter used Skia, like Skia was the reason that was happening according to something, and like to fix that problem, they are doing something else now.
Okay.
They might still be using Skia in many places, but that like flash of unstyled content thing was the catalyst. And I speak under complete correction here, but like maybe I'm Mandela affecting at the moment. Like
I'm gonna send this video to Brad and then here and like it's official. You heard it here first. Ben said Flutter sucks.
no, that opening a Flutter app and like for a second it
kidding.
looks like I've entered a liminal space. Not great.
No, I get that. I get that. I'm kidding. Yeah, cool. We should probably wrap this up. Zano, are there a
Right.
couple of other ones?
So that was kind of the big changes in the React ecosystem. But like React for Get is still being worked on. There's a whole bunch of stuff that we've run out of time for. Some of the highlights are Vercel's v0 is now open source. Basically, the SDK they used for that is now open source. Like you can use that. Storybook 8 was released. One of the nice things that they have is built-in visual testing, which is really cool.
But no, but like it's chromatic. It uses chromatic.
Yeah, but that's the company that funds all of
yes,
Storybook for the most
sure.
part. So,
but sure, but it's not. It doesn't make, if you're not using chromatic, it doesn't make it any easier to set up your own visual testing.
They took our dirt.
No, they took our monies. Your chromatics, like we use it in some products, but man,
it's expensive. Like I understand why. I understand why, because it's doing like a very, very useful, very hard thing. And probably wouldn't exist if they weren't taking that money.
But so just no, like unfortunately we're doing our own like diffing, and like it doesn't make that any easier. So
right.
Unfortunately.
So that was a thing. Tailwind is gearing up for version 4 release. They're moving off Post CSS onto Lightning CSS, which is built in Rust, so it should be faster.
It sounds like a Tailwind headline. It's like
Tailwind. So this is the wrong link. Wrong link. This is the Tailwind one. There
you need that preface of it's blazing fast.
Up to 10 times faster, Rust, and like
X10 or blazing.
Just do Command F on this page for built with love, please.
Either like the bingo is the.
It's not that bad.
So the bingo is blazing fast. X insert number here, and built with love.
Built with love, or like a coffee cup emoji or whatever. Like,
emojis, like a bullet list with emojis. Yeah.
I'm a bit mean today.
Another quick update I want to mention is you may have heard rumbles about Apple killing PWAs in Europe with the new Digital Markets Act. They've rolled that back because everyone was like, WTF, $3 trillion company can't do this, right?
Yes.
So they are still supporting PWAs in Europe.
But we'll see what the larger players here. I'm skeptical, but yeah.
In terms of this is important in terms of your JavaScript and front-end performance. First input delay is being deprecated from Core Web Vitals, being replaced by interaction to next paint.
Sense to me.
Which is a more lifetime of the page thing than it is like, hey, how long did it get to just start.
I think there's a lot of pages that I could get to render really quickly, but once you start typing in the text area, everything goes
but that's but that's a point. You don't like it because it makes it harder, but it's more meaningful for me.
On that note,
I like it. I like it.
On that note, like some of the work that React team's been doing is for things like hydration. So like let's say you have a server-side rendered page and it gets sent off, a hydration thing that can interrupt its hydration work and prioritize a not yet hydrated component that the user has started to interact with. So kind of selective hydration and prioritization. That's part of what they're busy working on. So that'll obviously also help your apps magically have a better interaction to next paint on that kind of like first page load. Like basically what it does is, very first thing it does is like sets up like an event listener, and then it'll replay that event once the component's hydrated and run the code.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I don't know why we just don't rebuild the DOM at some point. Like at some point, it's just getting ridiculous. Yeah, let's maybe leave it
like that's not even a hot take. That's like a hot dog bun that fell out of someone's hand of a day.
That's like a 3-month old. That's like 3-month old coffee left outside. Yeah. Yeah, Mario.
This is built in React.
Yeah. There's actually a game on Steam built with React.
So what's interesting about this
Parallax has come very far.
Parallax scroll.
I mean, what it uses is it uses a React renderer called 3JS Fiber. And what's interesting about this from a game development perspective is because of JavaScript's and React's so fast refresh and hot module reloading, you can kind of interactively make changes to the code and immediately have them show up, which if you've ever done any game dev, that's like not a thing that you normally get.
Yeah, that's interesting because it's just state. It's just because I think it's also it turns out that this is one of the benefits of downstream benefits of keeping your state and your presentation separate.
So it's a bit like Clojure-ish, working with a REPL almost kind of like vibe.
Yeah. I've actually a lot of the ways I use React is kind of very much inspired by Clojure.
Let's start closing off.
Yeah, talk about Clojure.
If you're building static sites that have markdown powered content, there's now something called BeatPress.
Okay.
Which might be interesting to you.
So let's say, is there one more thing that you maybe want to end off with, or is that it?
No.
There you go.
We're done here. We're done here. You've dropped a hot dog on the side of the road, and now
let's rebuild the DOM. There you go. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna keep on saying that. Cool, guys. Thanks so much. This is really great. Hopefully next month is going to be a bit easier. We don't have such a big backlog, but have a great day, guys.
Don't say backlog. Yes. Give me agile nightmares.
Okay, let's say task list. Task list. All right.
You're a good person.
Cheers, guys.
Have a nice weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.